So if you're here and we talk about these curves, if you have an irregular curve, remember these are all based on carrying capacity, but this is really no pattern, so it's going to be based on maybe a disease or abundance of food can lead to an increase, lack of predators can lead to an increase. If you're looking at cyclic, that usually references a predator-prey relationship, and erupt as it can be straight up or straight down. In this case, if we're gonna talk about the human population, we're talking about the baby boom. Something obviously happened to cause the population to go up so quickly. If you're looking at this graph, all you have to do is label things. Keep in mind, even though this line is a carrying capacity, and you know it because it's dotted, I might not give it to you on the test, and you're going to be able to figure it out based on where the population tends to fluctuate up and down. Because the population will continue to rise if there's no resistance. The carrying capacity would be the resistance, which would cause it to drop. So this would be overpopulation. This would be a decline. Right here, you see it coming down. This would be its point where it starts to stabilize because it's underneath the carrying capacity, so it's regrouping, let's say. This dotted line here represents death, and this, because it's a J-shaped, is exponential growth, or intrinsic rate, which is exponential growth. So we have factors that are going to affect growth rates, okay? And some are dependent, or you're dependent on them. So there's factors that we're dependent on that are going to determine whether we could survive or not. And there are also some factors that are dependent on us in order to survive. So it works both ways. Who could give me some answers? Disease. So we're not, obviously, we're not dependent on disease, but disease, think about it. The more densely populated group, the better disease is going to spread, or more it's going to affect the population. What else? Predation, good. Or competition, or relationships in general. And I'm giving you some ideas just so you could notice what you're dependent on. What's the most thing you're dependent on for survival and growth? Food and resources, right? In general. Water, air. So there's other factors that can affect population growth that really we're not dependent on at all, but it could wipe a population, or what are they?
Natural disasters.
Natural disasters, good. You know what I left out of here? War. So put that in there. I didn't even talk about it with my other classes. Natural disasters can include fires. Add that word there because sometimes you tend to forget that fires could be a natural disaster. Earthquakes, hurricanes, right? Volcanoes, all those can wipe out a large portion of the population. What else? The pictures speak 1,000 words. Weather and temperature and the sun. What else?
Habitat.
Destruction, yes, like deforestation. And anybody know what this picture is showing?
Immigration.
Nope. Look closely. I'll make it bigger.
Human.
Good job. Pesticides. Spreading of chemicals that can cause, pollution. Yes? Again, these are just some examples. It doesn't mean I'm listing them all. Just give you an idea of what you're dependent on versus what can change a population. So this is the world population, which has been growing exponentially. So for the entire history of the world, the population grew super slowly. And then all of a sudden, it doubled and doubled again and doubled again. Like, it's crazy that since 1950, the population was below 2 billion or around, and then all of a sudden, you went bam. When I started teaching this class, the question on the AP exam, what's the current world population, was 6 billion. And it's at 7.6 billion. So in my 20 years of teaching, the population grew it's a lot. Now look at this little curve. Every person that studies population or human population shows either a straight line coming out of here or a slight dip. They don't go really far past 2045 or 2050. But what do you think is happening there?
There's going to be something where we're not able to continue the population growth.
Something's going to happen. Like what? What ideas do you think would give people that study populations, that indication that the population is going to either do that or decline. Resource depletion. Well, but even, and it's funny that you say that, and I'm glad, because us not having babies started really in the 1950s. We stopped having a lot of babies, but the population grew exponentially. Super weird, but the population was so big to begin with because of the baby boom, right? That then there were so many people on Earth that even though the birth rates declined like drastically by half, the growth rate continued to rise. So people haven't been having babies for a long time, and sure, we might not have any, and then that would be, because that's happening in some countries, zero growth at all, like very little. Resources, diseases, natural disasters, that could lead to a serious decline. We really don't know, but they predict, and it's across the board. So let's talk about why we grew exponentially. Then we'll talk about why we grow, or what's happening in birth rate trends, what's happening in death rates, and then basically what the future holds. So there's 3 reasons why the exponential growth took place. Urbanization, I would say, we're going from here to here. Is this urban?
Agriculture.
That's agriculture, right? And with agriculture came what?
A lot of
Food. And from there we had urbanization. And with urbanization came what key component that triggered germ theory? We discovered that there's illnesses, right, that we can cure with medicine, and definitely that led to the real reason why we're overpopulated, was decline in death rates.
It's expanding. What is expanding?
Expanding what?
Population.
What happened from here to here to here? It's not really urbanization. This is a hard one, but it's expanding habitat. So we settled, right? We went from living in the forest and moving around to living in a house or a barn, right? To living in the city. So your first key to being able to settle was a habitat. Those are the 3 reasons for growth. Now we're going to break it down and look at what affects growth, right? Which is birth rates, death rates, immigration, and see where the biggest jump is coming from. As I mentioned, we're 7.6 billion right now, current world population. And you have to know the 3 most populated countries. China and India. Every time I do these notes, I have to change it. Number 1, our current population changes, and they keep jumping, okay? Look how close they are, but look at the difference in size of the size of the space. So if I was to ask you which is the most densely populated, you would have to say what? India. So make sure you make a note of that, okay? Because there's a big difference between population size and population density. And obviously, even though China is severely overpopulated, the space they have is so much greater that I feel like India suffers a lot more. And that's why India was the first real ones to say, we got to do something. And they did something.
What they do?
I'm going to tell you later. So when you look at populations, you want to look at these 2 things because there's so much difference in reasons for growth in death and birth and immigration because of these 2 things, which are what? Good job. Developed and developing, which we call developed what? 3 letters.
NBC.
Awesome. And developing? Good job. So I'm going to go through this, and then there's really just these factors that they look at, and that really sums it up for everything. We have higher incomes. We have stronger support systems. What kind of economy do we have? If we have industrial, what do they have? Agricultural. Good. And our population grows somewhat slow, and theirs grows pretty fast. And you're going to see that when I give you some curves. We're going to look at the history of birth rates when we studied at the end of this unit. But right now I want to show you the consistent pattern that's been going on with birth rates since the 1950s. So we had like a little bit of, it really hasn't been stable. It really has declined. No matter where you are, more developed, less developed, the world, decline in birth rates. Let's look at factors that affect birth rates. Every picture is a factor, okay? So help me out. You could just blurt them out and I'll expose them as you say them. Education for who? Women. Women really made a big difference. The fact that we went to school and went to work made our age for having babies extends significantly. So instead of 18, now it's 30 something, now it's 40 something. That reduces the amount of kids you're going to have in your lifetime. So you said infant mortality rates, because they've declined, obviously that's going to decline birth rates, right? Because when they did die, then you said I'm having more, right? So yes, definitely a factor. What else? Birth control. The easy access to them, and sadly to this, which I'm not even going to say the word, but what else? And I should drop this. Cost of raising children. Good job. There used to be a saying where 1 eats, 5 eat. That's not really the case anymore, especially because the cost of raising children is so high. 1 goes to school, 5 go to school. No, not here. What else? I'm just going to do this and this and this. So back in the day, you wanted a child to work the farm, so you had 6 and 7 children, right? We need people to help. That's not really the case anymore, but it did affect birth rates. So there's only 2 reasons for decline in death rates, but this is the reason for exponential growth. Because when I show you the whole picture, and you see when birth rates decline versus where death rates decline, but when the population exploded, it's because of this. So what led to these 2 things? Who could tell me? What's the reason for decline in death rates? Increase in healthcare, which led to what? Life expectancy. Good. Our life expectancy increased pretty significantly over the years. And I'm not giving you a full graph, and the fact that babies, again, we go back to that, weren't dying. So less death rates. But if you look here, in a matter of 10 years, it went up pretty significantly for both men and female. These are the reasons for the decrease in death rates, or the increased lifespan and decrease of infant mortality rate. It's not just that we grew food, it's that we knew how to eat right. Even cooking food and refrigerating and freezing food, that makes a big difference. Taking showers, brushing teeth, right? Flossing. And I'm done.